Algebra 1, Lesson 83, Coin Problems. Now this is an interesting lesson in that we start learning how to use story problems. So out of focus. I apologize. I always have this problem every time I start making a new video is turn on my camera, get it set up. It's totally out of focus. All right. So like I said, we're going to be doing systems of linear equations like this. However, it's going to be a story problem. So we're going to have to learn how to get these equations out of the information from the story problem we have. All right. Hey, let's go to this one. We'll use this one. This one is using quarters and dimes. Quarters and dimes are pretty easy to think about. So in this problem, they tell us Ming has $4.45 in quarters and dimes. And then it tells us that Ming has 8 more quarters than dimes. How many coins of each type does she have? So the goal here is to write 2 equations, all right? And the way you need to think of your equations is in 2 ways. You have to think in the number of items, which in this case is coins, and then you have to think of the value of items. So we have one sentence that tells us about the number of items. We have another sentence that tells us about the value of items. The value of items equation is usually the easiest one to write, and we'll go ahead and do that now. And then one thing that I always do on these nickel and dime problems is I never represent anything in dollar notation. I always do it in pennies. So if I think of $4.45 in pennies, that's actually going to be 445 pennies, right? Out of focus again. There we go. All right. So what we have here is we're going to use subscripts. We have a value of quarters being added to a value of dimes, and that's going to equal 445. Now the problem is if I just add up the number of quarters and the number of dimes, I'm not going to get 445. I'm going to get however many numbers of items I have. So I have to represent the value of quarters. So how many pennies is a quarter worth? It's worth 25. How many pennies is a dime worth? It's worth 10 dimes. Right? So 25 pennies times the number of quarters gives each quarter a value of 25. Plus 10 times the number of dimes gives each value, or each dime a value of 10, which is what you do when you're actually counting money. You just don't realize you're doing it. That's one of the funnest things about these problems for me. Is this is something that we all learned how to do in grade school, but now we're learning how to represent it in algebraic form, which can, solve complex problems. So anyways, now we've got our first equation, which is already done. So this is the equation in terms of value. And again, I do the values in pennies, so I don't have to deal with decimal points. Next, we have to deal with the equation concerning number of items. Now, it tells us, focus is just not working out for me today. All right, now it tells us she has 8 more quarters than dimes. So I have to represent this in an equation. And I always like to set these equal and then balance them afterwards. So I know that the number of quarters does not equal the number of dimes. So the question is, if she has 8 more quarters than dimes, then that means quarters is the bigger value. So in order to make dimes equal quarters, I'd have to add 8 to dimes to make them equal, since quarters is bigger. Now I have my second equation. From here, I can start using substitution and elimination. Now, thankfully, this bottom equation is already solved for number of quarters. So I can go straight into substitution. I can substitute NQ with ND plus 8. So I'll put that into that equation. And we'll write that over here off to the side. So if I put 25 times N sub D plus 8, which is equal to quarters, right? So I'm writing this instead of N sub Q. Then I add 10, number of dimes, equals 445. Now I can solve. I have to do a little bit of rewriting first, so I'll use distributive property. I have 25 N sub D plus 200, because 8 quarters is $2. 200 plus 10 N sub D equals 445. Last bit of rewriting I'll do is I'll add like terms. 35 N sub D equals 445 minus 200, because I subtract 200 from each side. So 35 N sub D equals 245. Now I just have to divide each side by 35 and find out how many times 35 goes into 245. Hold on. Ooh. So, why out of focus again? There we go. All right, so 245 and 35 are both divisible by 5. 5 goes into 35 7 times. 5 goes into 245. Let's see here. Goes into 24, 45, 9 times. Okay, so now I have 49 over 7. And then 7 will go into both of those. So I get 7 over 1. So a little bit of reducing lets me know that number of dimes is equal to 7. Now, if number of dimes is equal to 7, I can substitute that in here. That means number of quarters is equal to 7 plus 8. 7 plus 8 being 15. So n sub q equals 15. And that's my answer. Yeah, that's it for these problems. So we've already been solving these types of problems in our homework. Now we're just learning how to create the equations from the word problems. If you have any questions, let me know on Moodle, and I will see you in class.